All right. And welcome back, you guys, to the Self Selecting Podcast. I am your host, Corey Hageman. Thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. Today, what are we talking about? So, if you clicked on this, it's probably because you're either one, struggling to lose body fat, and you're hoping that I'm going to say something that, potentially could offer a solution to whatever the reason is that you're not seeing the progress that you're hoping for. Or two, you're gonna kick off a fat loss phase someday. Maybe it's tomorrow, maybe it's this week. Maybe, you know what, we're at the end of April by the time this is posted. This is gonna be midsummer. So maybe you're at that point where you're like, I'm trying to get summer shredded. I'm trying to get into the best shape of my life. I said it, spoke it into existence, but realistically, I don't want to make silly mistakes. I don't want to make my life harder. That's probably why you're here. Or you're here just because you love these videos, you love the podcast, and you tune into every episode. And of course, you are subscribed, you are liking, you are commenting. Thank you guys who are doing that. I really appreciate it. I was very much that person who, for the longest time, as long as I can remember, I struggled to lose body fat. It felt very ambiguous. It felt like this mountain each time I thought about it. It was always, can I do it? Not, I'm just going to enter into a deficit. And I think that's where a lot of you guys are probably at, is like, there's still that question, that ambiguity, that uncertainty of if you have what it takes to achieve said goal. And realistically, in some cases, if you're like, hey, I'm trying to get on stage and I'm trying to lose 25% of my body weight, understandably, it's the first time you've done it, or maybe you've never done it before, maybe last time you did it really incorrectly. Certain goals, they can require different levels of suck, but just in the scope of losing fat, I do think it's something that is generally pretty easy to do if you're doing the right things. And for the longest time, I wasn't doing the right things. For the longest time, I was focused on way too many things. I was that client that would just overthink every aspect. And I wasn't focused on those big levers, the ones that really move the needle, the ones that put you in a position where you're seeing consistent progress, even without making adjustments, even without starving yourself or doing a ton of cardio. And realistically, that is my goal with my content, with these videos on adherence, with any of the information I put out, is to put you in a position where you feel empowered, you feel autonomous, and you feel confident that, let's say you go on vacation, or, you weren't as tight with your food over the holidays the way you planned to be, and now you're a little heavier than you'd like. You want to trim up. My goal is to give you the tools and to really reassure you that it is possible, and it's not something it doesn't have to be that big of a deal. So today we are talking about 20 things that make dieting harder. 20 things, and hopefully through that I can also offer some solutions and speak on personal experience I've had with these things. All right, number one, only weighing yourself when you feel good. I can't tell you how long it's taken for me to just get in the habit of, no matter what, no matter if I use the bathroom, no matter if I ate off track, no matter if I did an at-home recipe that had a shitload of sodium, or I just wake up and it's, it's my time of the month and I know the scale is going to be up because physically I can feel it. It's taken me so long to get to the point where I'm just like, yeah, I don't give a shit. I'm just going to get on the scale because the scale is one metric, and it's an important metric when we're talking about establishing a weekly average. I can't tell you how many years I shied away from that because I was very afraid of what I would see. I equated so much value and self-worth into seeing that number reflect what I wanted it to reflect that day. It's very, very adolescent, very immature, and really unfair. It's super unfair to me. And I know this is a problem. I know this is something that a lot of people struggle with. A lot of clients I work with, when I look at their check-in, I ask clients to take all 7 weigh-ins for the week because I want to establish the average. I want to establish a realistic expectation in terms of what happens when they train legs hard, what happens when it's the week out from their period or the first day of their period, or, when, they go out to eat with their husband, they have a few glasses of wine. it normalizes those fluctuations because fluctuations are incredibly normal and expected. And that's the one I wanted to kick this off with. I just had a conversation with a client recently. Like, she kind of was like inadvertently dodging weighing herself. And I just told her, I'm like, hey, like, you want faster results. We're seeing incomplete data because you're only taking like 2 weigh-ins, and like ironically, they're only the days that like you feel like you're gonna get what you want. Realistically, we need to have all 7 data points because we need to know, like, are you actually losing weight? Are you slowly gaining weight, like for some reason? And if you're not losing weight, what can be fixed if the goal is weight loss, fat loss? What can be fixed to get you on the right track? But without that knowledge, without that confirmation that you're not losing weight, we can't make that decision. And as soon as like I laid it out that way for her, I'm like, I don't give a shit if it's like up half a pound or if it's up 3 pounds over one, the course of a couple of days. Like, we're going to take that information. We're not going to be emotional about it. And that's going to tell us what we need to do. But without it, we're really guessing. And it's kind of wasting your time and my time. Like, it's effort wasted largely on your part because we don't know if this is good enough, because very well we could see with all 7 data points, maybe those days you don't feel good, maybe they are actual low weigh-ins. I see this time and time again. Someone will tell me I didn't check my weight because I didn't feel like I was going to be leaner. I didn't feel tighter. I felt very bloated. I felt heavier. And they get on the scale. I tell them like, hey, can we just like commit to 7 days of weigh-ins, regardless of if you wake up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., regardless of if you're like running late, like just literally get on the scale. It takes 2 seconds, just commit to that. And more often than not, what we see is that the fluctuations are not that bad. The fluctuations are very reasonable. And typically they are within 2 to 4 pounds for like the weekly range. This is also why I encourage clients to look at like the difference between the low weigh-in versus the high weigh-in, but really our decision making, it can encompass the range, but it should be based on the average. It should be based on like the trend that we're seeing. Weigh yourself, even if you don't poop, even if it's your period, even if you got poor sleep, because then at the very least it can tell us like, hey, when this happens in the future, we can expect weight to go up said amount on average. Problem number 2, not having a target rate of change. I see this time and time again. Clients will go into the week and they're really just like metaphorically crossing their fingers, hoping that the day that they check in with me next, or hoping that like by the end of the week in 5 to 7 days, they start to feel like they're seeing some degree of progress. Now, where the issue is that it's ambiguous, it's unclear. And it happens quite often, happens more often than you think, where people will let outside circumstances or even how they feel that morning of, like if they wake up a little bloated, wake up but didn't use the bathroom, they'll let that kind of dictate their perception, their analysis of the week. And it's not very accurate. That's why having something that's just super objective, be like, I want to lose half a pound, or I want to lose 1 pound, or I want to lose 1.5, or even a range in between, be like half a pound to a pound, I'll be happy with. If it's under half a pound, not going to be super thrilled. If it's over if it's over 1 pound, I'm going to be pumped. That's going to be great. So this purifies that analysis at the end of the week. This makes it to where there are very clear expectations when it comes to your check-in. This is something when I've worked with coaches, I've always struggled with going into that check-in and not knowing like what is going to make them happy, like what is going to make them feel like this was productive, and on the inverse, like what is an indication that this wasn't a good week. I think it's a really good way just to have to have very clear expectations as a coach, but also with the client, so that there isn't that question, there isn't that stress around, was this a good week? And then it also, as a coach, it gives you a very clear idea of like, what are their expectations? And do you need to recalibrate those out the gate? I have clients who come to me who are like, I want to lose 2 pounds per week, and I want to do that consistently for 12 weeks. And anything less, I'm going to be disappointed and I'm going to feel like I'm the issue. And it's in those cases that I have to be like, okay, let's back up. What are you willing to do in order to create this 1,000 calorie deficit a day? Are you going to be going out to eat? Are you going to be like super strict with food reporting, cardio steps? Like, what's your execution like? It gives you an opportunity to have dialogue around that, and vice versa. Like, I might be like, hey, I think we need to lose a pound a week. I might be gunning for that, but realistically, a client's super thrilled with half a pound. And like that in itself tells me where they're at. And I do think in this case, like, even if you're coaching yourself or you're, running your own fat loss phase, it just gives you trajectory and it gives you something to weigh it against, depending on what happens in real time. Number 3, adherence is a moving goalpost. You don't really have clear expectations, definitions of what it means to be on track. And this is where I think a lot of people go wrong because they're like, I'm just going to go for an improvement from what I'm currently doing. And that's okay if like the objective marker is I don't really care how much weight I lose, or I don't care. Like it's more about like habit based and like seeing an improvement there. That's one thing. But in the case that someone's like, I want to lose 5 to 10 pounds over this specific amount of time or by this date, then we need to be very clear about like, yes, the target rate of change, number 2, but also what it means to be on track. I think having set expectations, having set definitions of this is going to be really helpful. I can't tell you how many times I've had clients come to me and they're like, I eat out multiple times a week, sometimes every single day. And that's not really something I'm willing to compromise on. So according to them, like that is like a part of their lifestyle. And like that's a condition they're asking for me to meet them with. And in that case, it's like, okay, but how are we going to still hit that deficit, that target deficit per day, knowing that there could be a lot of fluctuation in this meal out? And that's where I think having a conversation, or in the case you're doing this yourself, just being very clear about like with these meals out that could fluctuate heavily in terms of calories, what are you going to do to prevent that? Is that going to be something that every time you go out to eat, like, are you getting the exact same thing? Are you ordering no sauce? Are you asking for no butter, no oils in the preparation? Are you like getting carbs and are you weighing them out? Which, to be clear, like I don't bring a scale with me if I go to Chipotle or Sweet Green or Kava. I do kind of eyeball it, and I know like some people are really heavy handed like in serving you, and that's just something that you have to accept. So, I mean, like relating that back to what is good adherence, how much flexibility are you okay with? And what is the point where you're going to be like, this is a little too much. It's a little too gluttonous. Like I'm kind of moving, I guess like I'm kind of slacking in terms of the standard I'm going to hold for myself in order to achieve this goal. And again, if it's habit based, if you're like, I just want to make better decisions and I'm kind of, neutral on like what that translates into my physique, that's different. Maybe adherence can be a little bit more fluid, but even then I would still say like, what do you use to define like what is good adherence and what is bad adherence? I think having that clearly defined, I think is very helpful. And I think without that, it can definitely make a diet harder. Number 4, only tracking after you eat. So yes, if you follow a meal plan, this doesn't really apply to you. Maybe in some other way, I'll think of a comparison or analogy, but in the case that you are tracking macros, only logging your food after you've already served yourself and consumed it, every time that I've been over, it's because I've been doing that. It's because I've gone into a meal and been like, I think I have enough budget for this. And then after the fact, I'm like, yep, I did not. Now that I track it, it actually has way more. If you're tracking macros, logging food before you eat it, it doesn't take very long. And if it's similar food to what you're normally eating, this shouldn't really be like a big ask. It should be very comparable. And then realistically, if you get to the point where you're like, okay, when I go into dinner, if I've eaten all the meals that I normally eat, that means that I have this sliding budget of about this many calories. But realistically, I am never going to eat, like in my case, I'm like, I'm never going to have like 80 grams of carbs if I eat pretty normally and consistently. I'm not going into that final meal serving myself up that amount of carbs. Same thing with protein. I'm not going to go into that final meal and just assume like, oh yeah, I probably hit my protein, so I'm just going to have 20, 30 grams here. It makes it a lot easier if you just track in advance, or if you track even after you serve yourself. If you're just like, okay, like before I eat this is like final call, like train's leaving, I get to decide, do I actually want to eat this food? It's one thing to own your decisions, but it feels like shit, honestly, after the fact to be like, well, now that I know it, I wouldn't have done that. So go ahead, track your meals before you actually consume them. Track them in a way that at least gives you the agency to make modifications beforehand. Number five, yep, justifying your mistakes, like always having a reason to why you had to be non-adherent. Listen, like I'm not perfect. People, they often assume listening to my content or just, I don't know, seeing how I do things, they assume like I'm one of those like directly to the gram. There are days where I go over. There are days where I'm slightly off and I'm like, oh, okay, I don't want to repeat that. So I'm going to adjust for the next day so that doesn't happen again. Or the next time I'm in this position, I'm going to make a better decision. And I'm not just going to say a better decision. Here's what I'm going to do so I don't run into the same issue again. There is a lot of power and just a lot of, I don't know, sounds cheesy, self-love in just being like, yeah, I don't have to be perfect, but I do need to learn from these instances when I'm acting in a way that doesn't really align with the goal I have in hand. Justifying your mistakes, blaming other people, blaming your coach, blaming like the circumstance. Like there are definitely times where like I will rationalize and I'll be like, this is why I did what I did, but it still doesn't change the fact like that needs a label that was off plan, that was non-adherence, and that's okay. It is fine. Like it's not that big a deal. But in the coach client setting dynamic, it becomes very difficult to really help someone see out their fullest potential and help them develop that skill of dieting when every time they're off track, there's always a justification. It's just, yeah, like it's just really thinking about it. And you can kind of go inward with this and be like, okay, like what am I so afraid of? Like when I come up with this justification, is it because like I don't want to admit that I'm not perfect? Like I don't want to admit that like I couldn't hack it, and this time I was a little weaker. I made a decision, like however you want to label it. But bottom line, just like coming to terms with the fact like you can go off track and it can be just that, and it can be isolated and it doesn't have to indicate your value or your self-worth, and you can just move on from it. But how are you going to prevent this from happening in the future? You're probably not going to if every time it's like, well, this other person, or they put me in this position, or the food was late, or I had to do. It's like, again, like all maybe fine explanations, but don't justify it if it's not aligned with your goals. Number 6, intuitively drinking water. I am very bad at drinking fluids. Like it's something I can very much go several hours, almost the entire day, multiple days in a row, like off 1 liter, maybe 2, and I won't even think about it. It will confuse me the next day because I'll be like, I have a headache. I wonder what, like I'm low energy. And be like, yeah, you bitch, you haven't drank water in like almost 2 days. A lot of people I work with and a lot of people I speak to, they're not as on it naturally, innately. It's not built into their daily routine to consume the amount of water that they need. And I can tell you, like, the best way to shed water weight, one of the quickest ways to diurese is to drink water. You can argue back and forth and be like, you don't need a gallon, like a gallon's too much, that's harmful. Okay, fine. I've had people come at me and be like, that's dangerous information. Right. So when it comes to the amount of water that you lose unintentionally each day, it's like 2 liters. So if you're falling short of that, if you're falling under 2 liters per day as your intake, you're pretty much at a net zero. And that's like not including training. That's not including doing cardio, sweating a ton. If you do sauna, I don't know, if you live somewhere where the climate's very warm, these are all things that you should consider when it comes to hunger, satiation, performance, sleep, overall energy, cognitive function. Water is so freaking important. And there are very few people that just like naturally are going to get in 3 to 4 liters a day without having to be conscious of it. If that's you, amazing. I would definitely say like look for signs that you are hydrated or not properly hydrated. But realistically, if you're someone like me who does struggle getting in 2 to 3 liters and you like have to make it an intention, then I would have that target each and every day, and I would treat it just as importantly as dietary adherence and training. Number 7, romanticizing getting poor sleep. Many people did not like, I mean, at the time this is posted, this will be months beforehand, but many people did not like when I said that like you're not building muscle because you're not sleeping enough and like you need to prioritize it. People like came out. They're like, I have kids. I'm a nurse. Like I work full time. And I'm like, I get it. I'm specifically talking more so to the people that are like, hey, there's nothing I can do. There's absolutely nothing within my control that I can change. So I'm just going to continue this pattern, even though when we actually dissect it, when we peel back the layers, it's like there is time spent watching TV. There's a lot of inefficiency throughout the day. There could even be the instance where the individual is waking up extremely early to get in cardio, not even to lose body fat, but just like to supplement and to make them feel better. It's not to say there aren't instances where sleep, like as a resource, is limited based on the responsibilities. I am empathetic when it comes to that. I recognize there are people that they work, they do have kids, and they don't have the ability to get 8, 9 hours of sleep. But why I bring this up is because I think it's something in our culture and in the fitness space, a lot of people love to kind of put on this front that like getting little sleep is cool. It makes you cool. It makes you hardcore. And like, no, like it does take a lot of effort to continue to function off low sleep. But in the instance where you have the ability to get, even if it's 30 minutes, even if it's an hour more, I would strongly recommend prioritizing that. And also the amount of people that I know who do have kids, who I've worked with, who do work 12-hour shifts and they have long commutes. Still, I've worked with these individuals before, and it's not uncommon to ask and be like, hey, send me your work schedule, send me what your day looks like, almost like give me a time block of like what your day is. And pretty easily, there is room in there where we can start to carve out more time that's dedicated to sleep. It might not be the case for everyone listening to this. You might be heated and your ears might be shooting smoke out of them. I don't know. But realistically, I get it. If it's not within your control, it's not within your control. And maybe we need to do something on the coaching side of things or even like on the planning side of things that gives you more days that you can have off, that you can recover. But if it is within your control, if it's something that you can carve out more time, I would highly, highly recommend it. It's going to pay dividends. Number 8, doing a complete lifestyle overhaul. Now, this can be quite literal in the sense you go from eating a specific way to cutting out all sugar, cutting out all saturated fat sources, doing 2-a-days, starting this like really intensive, really strenuous training program, also taking food down. Let's say you're naturally just eating 2,000 calories and you're like, I'm going to go down to 1,200. Essentially, like you're changing so many things at once and you're changing them to a magnitude that like realistically, you're probably not going to be able to stick with. Like maybe you could do it for like a week and who knows, maybe this is just complete. You're like, hey, I'm going cold turkey on all these things, like with the specific foods like you're eating or not eating. I get that. But I think you're going to find more success in approaching it with more of a realistic mindset. The individuals that have the time and the ability and like they don't have nearly the responsibility that others do, who can just go complete 180 overnight and there are no residual effects from that. Like amazing. That's not going to be everyone. Most people, when you make a drastic change to your diet, even if the food choices are still the same, but like you seriously cut down on the calories, there's going to be some reverb there. Same thing if like, let's say from a scheduling standpoint, if you and your partner, like, I mean, if y'all parent and like now you're like, hey, I need to carve out more time into the day because I'm going to start doing 2 days or I'm going to spend more time at the gym, or even just the fact like, hey, I'm going to be getting up a lot earlier. Like there's more than likely going to be something that comes from this that needs some tweaking and needs some troubleshooting. Realistically, what I would say is focus on those big levers that are going to move the needle, but you don't have to do them overnight. Like you don't have to go from 2,000 to 1,000 to lose a little bit of fat. And realistically, I would say the more extreme approach that you're taking, the harder that reverb is going to be, especially if you don't plan to continue said thing moving forward. So just keep that in mind, is like how far from like what your baseline is, what you can tolerate, what you enjoy doing, how far are you drifting? And do you plan to be on this indefinitely? Is it something that like after the show or after the diet, you're going to revert back to old ways? What is that going to look like? And where are you going to be physically, emotionally, physiologically? Number 9, eating low volume foods because X, Y, and Z, because insert this influencer, this competitor, this is what she has for breakfast or he has for post workout. Realistically, if you've struggled with dieting in the past, I don't recommend just doing this like super broy bodybuilder, approach where you have like, I don't know, 30 grams of avocado and like I don't just, I'm blanking on like actual examples right now, but like rice is one that I talk about pretty often. Like if that's something that you enjoy, great. And you have the calories that allow you to eat it and like fit it into a meal in a way that's satisfying. Awesome. But I can tell you, like most people that I work with, like part of the reason they're not able to lose weight is they can't stick to the diet. So simply just condensing down all the foods that you're eating every day into this very low volume, meal structure and I guess like day in the life meals, probably going to have some consequences in terms of hunger, in terms of satiation. And if this lends to being non-adherent, then like quite literally, objectively, that's not worth doing because you might be putting forth the effort in selecting these meals. But if it just turns into you going off track, well, it kind of nullifies any effort there. Personally, I would stick with foods that are going to be more satiating. I would stick with things that you do enjoy eating or you can prep in a very seemingly easy way, like low effort way. But you don't have to do all high volume foods. It doesn't have to be low volume, but just be mindful of like your enjoyment and satisfaction with these meals. And if it's a huge pain in the dick to just like make the meals or source whatever parts are on the meals, like oftentimes you can ask your coach or you can find something that's comparable that might be a little bit easier to source. Number 10, comparing your progress aimlessly. I see this all the time. I'll see my clients, they'll be commenting on like top pros videos, pictures. They'll send it to me. They'll be like, I want glutes like her. Like, what do I need to do for me to get this? Without really understanding. Like one specific girl I'm thinking of, I'm like, she's on so many drugs. Like she's on a lot of drugs and like you're pretty much natural at this point. Also, she's been doing it at the highest level for 5-10 years. So, I mean, like realistically, like, yeah, we can work towards this, but we can't just compare like 1-to-1. Like, it's not like that is the final destination. Instead, we should be thinking about like, okay, she has a lot of projection to her glutes and she has very developed glute meads. Cool. How do we get that? We bring up your glutes and we develop your glute meads, but that might look different even with the same degree of development, even at the same body fat. So just keeping that in mind whenever you see different people online, you really don't know what they're taking, if they're taking anything, what they are doing like in terms of their life and like what sacrifices they're making in order to achieve this physique, what their mental health looks like. So with a lot of the extreme, like very freaky transformations and physiques we see, like guys, I hear the protocols, like I hear what they're doing and it's wild. Like it's a lot. Okay. So keep this in mind is that like, you don't have that same disclosure when you're looking at someone online. You don't know what it took for them to get there. You don't know how long it took. And realistically, we can help like bring your physique to its fullest potential. But even then, you might not have naturally, genetically, what it would take to look that same way. So just you can have inspiration. There's a lot of girls I look up to. I'm like, yeah, like it would be great. I'd love to have glutes and like that shape like theirs. But I have to work with like what I was given. And for some people that just might not be in the cards. Doesn't mean you don't work towards the best version of yourself, but just be careful, be skeptical when we're talking about online and like social media and making those kind of comparisons. Cause honestly, you also don't know if that person's photoshopping. And like nowadays, like you have apps that literally will Photoshop waist, glutes, like and on video too. Like they're very sophisticated, very good. So just again, be mindful of that. Number 11, making adjustments without talking to your coach or secret adjustments, doing things, kind of doing whatever the fuck you want and not disclosing that to your coach. It happens. It doesn't happen a lot. I feel like I have a good relationship with my clients where they do feel like even if it's not what I think is the best, they still feel comfortable to be like, hey, I am going to do this or I want to do this. Like, how can you best support me in doing so? Or how dangerous is this if I actually go through with it? I've talked to a lot of competitors. There is very much a culture around not going against your coach if they're very adamant that like they want things done a specific way. And it's not necessarily uncommon at the higher level to have coaches in your corner who you're like, okay, I'm going to take their advice, but I'm also going to kind of do my own thing. Um, it's more common than you think. I would say, like, yes, there's an inherent risk that comes with that because like now you can't really take what they're saying like to heart because they don't know what you're actually doing. And their advice might actually pose a different kind of risk depending on if we're talking about with drugs, cardio, fat burners, whatever. So really just understanding that if you're going to be like kind of steering the ship, it's best if you have a coach in your corner, it's best to have that kind of relationship where you can be open and honest, even if like there is discourse. And there have been instances where I have not wanted to do what the coach I was working with recommended. And I've kind of brought that to their attention and they're like, cool, I respect it. You can make this decision, but at least they're aware. And the instances where I've had clients who are very just straightforward, like, hey, I want to do this instead of what you suggested. I'm also very adamant if it's something that I'm not comfortable with, which I do think you kind of owe it to the coach to give them that ability to decide, do they want to be a part of it? Because certain practices, I'm just like, you can do that, but you're not going to do it under my supervision because I don't feel like that's safe. And I don't feel like that's aligned with my coaching values as a whole. So yeah, if you're, and I mean, this could, like, I'm talking about largely with drugs, but like this could very well be the diet itself. Like if you're not hitting what the coach is telling you to because you feel it's too extreme or it's not extreme enough, it is worth having a conversation with them. Number 12, beating yourself up over daily fluctuations. I have so many videos on this, on like what weight fluctuations actually are, what causes them, what would be an indication it truly is a weight fluctuation, and what would be an indication it's a hormonal imbalance or it's something bigger. It sucks. Like, it sucks to hear clients get so down, and like I'm affected by it too. Like it drives me crazy when like I see a fluctuation and I'm like, I know what this is caused by, and it still like kind of affects my mood or makes me, feel disappointed. But this is where like you might not be able to control the initial reaction, and like you can have that negative reaction or you can be disappointed. But realistically, you need to actively talk yourself through that and be like, yeah, it might not be what I was hoping for, but it kind of makes sense. And I think being very active with that dialogue with yourself is super important, because the alternative is just like looking at the scale weight fluctuation and just being like, oh yeah, no, like this is because I suck and it's because I'm not doing anything right. And it's because the diet's not working. And you can just make all these assumptions and then just begin to spiral. And I see this time and time again. I'll get on calls with clients and they'll be really disappointed. They'll be bummed. And I'm like, no, like you can't control this. If you were adherent and you did everything that we discussed, that's on plan, like realistically, like this could just be normal. This could be a normal fluctuation. But if you let it then affect your mood and let it affect how you go into the gym and the attitude you have and how you treat the people around you and whether or not you stick to your diet, those are all going to manifest as much bigger problems down the road. So I think being able to nip that in the bud and be like, okay, I might have a negative reaction towards this, but I'm not going to let it affect me any more than just in this moment. Cool. Don't love that. I'm going to get on with my day. I kind of have to. Number 13, extending the diet past what you can actually handle. Big and very common problem when it comes to competitors, people not really understanding that there is a point where if you continue dieting and you continue losing weight, you're actually going to look worse for it. You're probably going to lose muscle. And overall, you're just making it that much harder coming out of the diet. And this isn't just specific to competitors, but in a fat loss phase, like there are people that I've worked with that are just so insistent on like holding on to that level of leanness and even continuing to get leaner and leaner past what is productive. Yet they're struggling with the high lethargy. They're completely exhausted. I had a girl check in this week who I've told her many times, I'm like, hey, you're feeling this way because you're too lean. We need you to gain body fat. And I've said this to her many times. I'm like, we need food to go up. If it's not going up, we need to continue increasing it. I need you to follow this. Like, I need you to actually submit to this idea that like gaining body fat is going to resolve some of what you're feeling. But it can be hard. It can be hard mentally to kind of switch gears and accept that like that is a specific phase that has a specific purpose, but I might actually be better for coming out of this diet. And realistically, I would say coming out of the diet before you get to the point where you have to fold. I've been there myself where I've like pushed past what I can handle and it hits you hard on the rebound. So, I mean, like, it's just something to consider is like if you are getting to a level of body fat that you've never gotten to before, what's the exit? What's the exit strategy? How much dietary debt have you incurred? What's the plan on paying it off? Also, like, is it beneficial to lose those last 5 pounds, or would you be better like set up if you like stop, let's say like you want to get to 125, you stop at 130 and you're like, I'm just going to hang out here because this is what I can tolerate, and getting to 125 or getting to 120, that would actually make it that much harder and really start to show up in how I'm performing in my sessions and really just how I'm feeling day to day. Number 14, not tracking your period. This is a big issue, especially for athletes who are getting to low body fat levels. It's as simple as saying like, I got my period. That is day one, and continuing to track that throughout the month. Being able to establish, when are you ovulating? What is the week before your period look like? Does the week before your period include a lot of PMS? If so, if we know when day one is, does that happen 3 weeks into your cycle? It is just a matter of like keeping an eye on this. And I promise, like if you struggle with heavy PMS, if you struggle with some of those symptoms that manifest before your period or during, this is going to be really helpful in making sense of when those symptoms arise, especially if that's very upsetting for you. And if that's really hard for you to conceptualize in, let's say, like a fat loss phase where you're not seeing the scale weight go down during that time. Number 15, doing an overhaul in training at the same time that you start a diet. Kind of goes back to doing a whole lifestyle overhaul. I wouldn't change too many things at once. I would have the training locked in prior to starting the fat loss phase. And really, I would be very proficient in these movements. If you are getting towards the end of a fat loss phase, like, yes, there could be merit to reorganizing what you're doing to make it a little safer for you because you're going to be prone to injury at that point with lower recovery capacity. But realistically, in the case that you're just starting a diet, I would have the training mapped out at least a few weeks beforehand, letting motivation and energy dictate training intensity and adherence. And I think I fucked that up. Number 15. No, number 16. There we go. Almost done. With this, we need to be mindful that like there is a clear bar for what we're trying to hit in terms of our training. And it happens a lot where people will start dieting. They'll start to feel under recovered. They'll start to feel lower energy. And realistically, they begin to scale their training down accordingly. And to some extent, like, yes, it makes sense to, modulate in a way that allows you to still create good tension across muscle groups. But what really kind of confuses me is like early into a diet when someone isn't that much leaner, maybe 1 or 2 weeks, they're starting to feel that drop off in energy, maybe because it's an abrupt change in energy balance. So instead of saying like, I'm going to maintain my weights across these lifts, or I'm going to do my best to try to, they're like, let's just completely scale back training. Let's like reduce it by 50%. And this is one of the quickest ways that I see people dig that hole that ultimately leads them into losing muscle very early on into a diet, or into a diet that seemingly isn't that steep. And the same thing kind of applies to adherence. It's like if you're going to let motivation, energy levels, or this like, I don't know, fluid belief that like you don't have enough in you dictate whether or not you should eat more, it's going to be really hard for you to see progress. And I know that goes completely against the whole intuitive eating movement, but realistically, I think a lot of people, when they start to make emotional decisions on a daily basis about food based on feeling hungry, based on feeling low energy, that typically is what manifests then as like having these stretches a week where you believe you're dieting, but you're really not, because you're having increased food kind of sporadically in response, more so like a reaction to these uncomfortable feelings that, like, honestly, we can say are expected in a fat loss phase. Number 17, skipping check-ins or parts of your check-ins. This is one I see typically towards the end of a diet, or in the case that someone is not really seeing the progress that they want to see, or intermittently whenever someone is experiencing that menstrual cycle bloat, fluctuations in hormone levels that are expected. People will miss pictures, they won't take their measurements, or they will take like portions of their weekly sheet. Like they'll track some of their weights, but as soon as it gets a little a little high, they just stop. Same thing with step count, same thing with sleep. And this is where I think, like kind of what I said at the beginning, having a really strict standard for like, this is what I'm going to report each and every week, I guarantee that will put you in a better position to make well-informed decisions around what you should do with the diet. But having that data, as much as it can be uncomfortable, or as much as like you can begin to doubt the importance of it, especially if it's going to be what you perceive as negative, it can actually be really helpful. And from a coach's perspective, having these gaps is actually more concerning, because it's like you like removed my ability to use that information to make decisions. And we kind of need to understand why. Like, why did you think that like skipping measurements, if it was intentional, or skipping pictures, why was that a conscious decision that you made? And I'm not talking about in the case like you're running late, you didn't have time, or you just like truly forgot. That does happen. And I'll have clients check in and be like, hey, sorry, I'll get my measurements in tomorrow. Just take a look at them when you can. Or same thing with pictures. Like, I just didn't have time. I was running late, overslept. But then they get it in the next day. It's just when it becomes that habit where consistently you're in a routine of avoiding these parts of the check-in, or just simply not even checking in altogether. That's where I think that the diet is going to become that much harder. Number 18, letting untracked meals get way out of hand. Now, I think going back to adherence, it should be factored in what constitutes an untracked meal. And there are times where I give my clients a lot of flexibility. Like, I'm very much like, go out and just like, let's see what happens. Like, let's not make a big deal about it. Let's not have these strict, rigid parameters. And in that first week or in that second week, I can kind of see, okay, this is generally how this person is going to eat if left up to their own decision making. And then from there, if needed, I can intervene. But realistically, in the case that someone is getting a little wild and like, to the point they're like, yo, like this was a meal, but I also had appetizers and I overate on chips and I also had multiple drinks. And then I got home and I had more food. So it kind of just turned into this free for all for the course of 5 to 6 hours. That's something that I'm like, yo, like if we are going to have untracked meals, if we're going to do this semi-regularly, we need to understand really the magnitude that they're going to have on the rate of change per week. And I'm very comfortable telling clients like, hey, where you're at right now, we shouldn't do an untracked meal because it's only going to make things harder. It's actually going to make it to where now you have these like fluctuations right after the meal. And then the whole week you're spent trying to get the weight back down, only to then have that same meal, which is then going to make you want to overdo the next one you have. I think in some instance, you do have to be adamant that like these meals aren't undoing progress from earlier in the week, at least to a large extent. And that kind of brings me to my next point, number 19, eating out too often. Talked about this earlier. Whenever you have this expectation that like, hey, I'm going to have these meals out, it just works with my schedule. Okay. If you're eating out, like there is a point where each time you eat out, you're kind of gambling. And I think it's important, if you're not seeing the results that you want, or if you're like, you're very set on like, I want to see results this first week, then limit the amount of times that you're taking that risk. Really, if you treat eating out like it's a gamble each time, like you might hit it right on the nose and get the macros that you're hoping for, but you also might get served an additional 200 to 300 calories. And if you're doing that every single day, or you're doing that multiple times a day, very easily, you can take yourself out of a deficit, yet your belief is very much that you're in a deficit. Like you are accruing that dietary fatigue either way. So I don't think it's a big deal if you're seeing the results that you're after and you're pretty happy with your ability to track when you go out and you're eating roughly the same thing. But in the case that progress is not moving, progress is not happening, the scale weight's not moving, this could be a very easy thing to modify that'll help you lose weight a little bit faster. And number 20, trying to make high calorie foods fit into your macros. I've had this discussion with clients before several times where an individual is really set on having like a specific breakfast, snack, dessert, dinner, and they know they're like, okay, like in order to make this work into my diet macros, this means that I'm having to forego so much and really like have very small, very, high volume meals, but seemingly very low calorie meals at different points throughout the day. I think, it's one thing if you're adherent and you can make this work, but we also have to weigh this against training performance and whether or not you are timing your nutrition in a way that allows you to get the most out of these sessions. Now, in the case that like trying to fit these high calorie foods actually leads to you going off track, I think it's pretty straightforward. If that's the case, we need to omit them probably, or find a way where, it's not so much of a hit on the meals outside of that time that ultimately led you to be non adherent. But I really do think like getting away from this, I don't know, ideology of like every day I need to have a treat. Like I need to have something that's like resembling cookie dough or cake or like just, I don't know, snacks. And like, I know that for some people, they're like, no, this is how I stay on track. And that's okay if that like does work as a crutch, but not in the instance that you were sacrificing from all your other meals to an extent to where it's then showing up in your training. I think that's a pretty big red flag that we probably need to remove that crutch because it's not actually helping you as much as it's hindering you. You guys, 20, that was a lot. I need to get some food. I need to get some water. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope this is helpful. I hope there are some actionables. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.